The mind crafts a tapestry of names, roles, and memories. Each label we carry feels like an anchor, solid, dependable, reassuring, yet in the hush of certain moments one might notice a flicker of something else, a faint recognition that the anchor itself is woven from thoughts, cultural echoes, and stories told by others. This is no ordinary matter of introspection. It is an unraveling of the very notion we hold so dearly. I am me. Allow the commonplace rhythm of life to be the backdrop, the alarm that sounds before dawn, the silent coffee cup on the table, the rush to fulfill obligations. In that space, a quiet voice often remains unheard. It whispers, "What if all these labels are illusions? What if the self is more malleable than you ever suspected?" This whisper is a doorway to a grand puzzle. Many prefer not to open that door for fear of what lies beyond. But the question beckons, can we glimpse a deeper essence when we set aside the masks? Consider a typical day. The body moves through corridors, interacts with colleagues, meets friends, laughs at jokes, frets over finances. Beneath these surface happenings, an identity takes shape. I am the worker. I am the spouse. I am the anxious one. I am the hopeful dreamer. Yet if one pauses to observe the mind in action, truly observe, without judgment, something intriguing emerges. The I that we assume is so concrete seems to shift depending on context, mood, or environment. One moment, we're confident and bold. The next, uncertain and fragile. So which version is real? Neuroscientists describe the brain as a dynamic network of firing neurons. Identity from that angle is a continuous improvisation, a storyline patched together from memories, social cues, and personal inclinations. Philosophers from many ages have suggested that the self is a fluid phenomenon, not a rigid statue. In the words of certain existential thinkers, the individual is perpetually becoming, never fully formed. Imagine the mind as a stage where different actors appear, each wearing a mask labeled I. The performance changes with every act, every new prop. Pause for a moment. Reflect on a memory from childhood, an instance of pure wonder, or perhaps a moment of acute embarrassment. Recall the emotions, the images, the smells. Notice how the I from back then feels foreign, as if it belonged to a different person. And yet that memory is part of your current story. The self that once giggled at shadows on the wall is not the same self reading these words. The mind might claim continuity, but on close inspection that continuity dissolves into a collage of shifting experiences. Some may sense a challenge lurking here. If the self is not a permanent structure, what keeps us stable? Where do we find our footing in a world that often demands certainty? The mind clings to roles, routines, or self-definitions because it seeks comfort in the familiar. Letting go of a fixed identity can feel like stepping into a wide-open field without a map. But the paradox is that such a step can unlock a profound liberation. Imagine the possibility that you are neither the sum of your past nor the total of your aspirations. You are the spacious awareness in which thoughts arise and dissolve. You are the observer behind each flicker of emotion, and in that observer's seat, no single label can contain you. This realization can unsettle the well-worn patterns of the psyche, but it also reveals an expanse of freedom where new potentials flourish. Let us not pretend this perspective is simple. Culture saturates our minds with ideals of who we should be, pious or rebellious, conformist or revolutionary, confident or meek. Even spiritual traditions can impose new identities. I am a seeker, I am enlightened, I am awakened. Yet if one looks deeper, each label is still a costume. The essence that sees through the costume remains untouched. Try this reflection. Take a moment, wherever you find yourself, and allow awareness to rest on the breath. Feel the inhale, sense the exhale. Now, silently ask, who breathes? Is it a body on autopilot? Or is it a conscious entity called me? Watch how swiftly the mind leaps in to claim ownership. But if you continue observing, you might glimpse that breathing happens without the need for an owner. The body breathes, the mind interprets, and an identity emerges saying, I am the one breathing. Is that identity genuine, or is it a mental habit? There's a tendency in these discussions to recoil and think, this is too abstract. I have bills to pay, relationships to maintain, real problems to solve. But consider that many of our fears, insecurities, and tensions are intertwined with the assumption that the self is a permanent fixture. I am a failure, I am worthless, I am superior, or I am destined for greatness. These are narratives that can suffocate or inflate the ego. By recognizing the fluidity of identity, we loosen the grip of those narratives. We begin to see them as passing clouds rather than absolute truths. Picture the mind as a vast sky. Thoughts and self-definitions are like clouds drifting across. Some clouds are thick and stormy, others are wispy and serene. None of them last forever. Even the stormiest cloud will pass, revealing the open expanse. So, what if you shift your allegiance from the cloud to the sky? That shift dissolves the illusion that any single passing phenomenon defines you. This perspective aligns with many voices across different eras. Some point out that once we detach from the notion of a static I, we become more empathetic, more flexible, and more open to the experiences of others. Empathy blossoms when we see that everyone else is also a shifting tapestry just like us. Arrogance or shame loses its footing when the self is recognized as ephemeral. There is a quiet sense of unity in that recognition, as though each of us is a wave on the same ocean of awareness. Some might scoff, insisting that a cohesive identity is necessary for success or stability. They might say, if I don't cling to who I am, how will I find motivation or direction? But let's question that assumption. Perhaps real motivation arises when we are not imprisoned by a single idea of ourselves. Maybe direction is clearer when we are not burdened by old labels that no longer serve us. Think of how often individuals cling to outdated self-definitions. I'm not creative. I can't change. I'm doomed to repeat my mistakes. Each statement is a fortress, but the fortress is built on illusions. If a fortress is made of illusions, it may keep you feeling safe for a while, but it also traps you within a limited scope. When illusions crumble, you stand in open ground. That openness might feel unsettling, but it also reveals new horizons. Freedom, in this sense, is the willingness to be fluid, to let identity be a flexible expression rather than an unyielding prison. Recall the earliest memory you can. Notice how it feels like an echo, a faded imprint of someone you once were. Then recall the most recent moment of self-awareness, perhaps an instant of pride or embarrassment earlier in the day. Place them side by side in your mind's eye. Observe how different those two selves appear. The only thread connecting them is a continuity of awareness that observes both. That observer does not age, does not cling to a label. It witnesses. This is not a matter of mere philosophizing. Contemplate the implications for your relationships, your aspirations, your sense of purpose. If identity is malleable, you have permission to evolve in ways you never considered possible. You can let go of shame or guilt that no longer serves you. You can adopt new skills or perspectives without the burden of, that's just not who I am. The illusions that once bound you to old patterns can dissolve, revealing a vast potential. One might ask, is there a risk of losing myself entirely? The mind often conjures that worry, but consider the paradox. By seeing the ephemeral nature of identity, you don't vanish. Instead, you connect more deeply with the living essence beneath every label. That essence is not a concept, but a direct experience of being, the silent presence that remains when all definitions fade. This perspective need not be forced. There is no command to discard every role or name. Instead, observe how each role can be worn lightly. Let the roles serve as useful garments rather than chains. A parent, a professional, a dreamer. These can be functional aspects of life, yet they need not define the core of your existence. The core is the luminous awareness that experiences each role, then steps away when the moment changes. Reflect on how everything began with the mundane, the typical motions of an unremarkable day. That was the stage upon which identity seemed so entrenched. We stepped into a space of questioning. Who or what is behind these roles, these self-images, these inherited labels? The challenge was to see through illusions, to face the unease of letting them go. The reward is a glimpse of boundless freedom, a sense that the mind is more expansive than any single definition. Let's consider a quiet practice. Find a moment of stillness, perhaps after the usual tasks are done. Close your eyes. Notice a thought that arises. Watch how the mind labels that thought. Mine, yours, positive, negative. Now gently ask, who is observing this thought? Observe the space that question creates. The label dissolves, leaving only awareness witnessing the passing mental event. This is not a trick. It is a direct look at how identity forms and dissolves in real time. No concluding applause, no final bow. This exploration does not terminate here. There are countless layers to peel back, about relationships, about how society molds our self-image, about the hidden potential that emerges when illusions lose their power. If the curiosity sparked here remains lit, further expansions await. Each perspective offers a fresh vantage on the nature of consciousness. Each vantage reveals new facets of what we call I.